She didn't destroy you, she just followed the script written into her bones, the one you were too romantic to read. You called it betrayal. She called it survival, because what you thought was love was her instinct selecting, testing, adapting, without apology. This isn't about hating women, it's about seeing nature unmasked. It's about Schopenhauer's warning that what you crave as eternal was never promised, not by biology, not by her, not by life. Romantic love, he said, is just nature's camouflage for reproduction. You gave her soul, she gave you selection, you offered devotion, she offered utility, and when your usefulness faded, so did the illusion. This video is not comfort, it's confrontation, because the man who mistakes instinct for intimacy will always suffer in silence. But if you're ready to tear off the veil, to stop being chosen for function and start choosing yourself, then stay. This might be the first time someone speaks the truth you always felt but were never allowed to say. He thought love meant being seen, not as a role, not as a utility, but as a soul. Yet every glance she gave him was measured, not in tenderness, but in trade. What he called connection was her calculating compatibility. He opened up like a confessional, shared the childhood wounds, the sacred dreams, the fractured faith. She listened, not out of reverence, but relevance. Can this man protect me, provide for me, provoke my desire? It wasn't romance, it was recruitment. He mistook function for fate. Because he healed her, she called it love. Because he paid attention, she praised his presence. But the second his usefulness faded, so did her affection. This wasn't betrayal. It was nature recalculating. Her instinct doesn't see essence. It sees leverage. She didn't need his poetry. She needed his protection. She wasn't attracted to the man. She was attracted to the advantage. That's the part no one warns you about. Masculinity is only sacred to a woman if it serves her survival. He thought his strength would make him irreplaceable. But even strength, once predictable, becomes background noise. And women aren't drawn to background. They chase signal. He tried to be enough money, enough attention, enough softness. But instinct doesn't chase enough. It chases what solves the most urgent internal fear. And when that fear changes, so does the attraction. She didn't fake it. She just responded to a biological program older than morality. Jung called it projection. He gave her a soul she never claimed. Schopenhauer called it arithmetic, a simple equation of selection. She wasn't cruel. She was consistent with her nature. So no, he wasn't chosen for who he is. He was chosen for what he solved, for what he made her feel, secure, excited, protected, but not for long. Because instinct doesn't do gratitude, only efficiency. He thought loyalty meant forever, but in her world, loyalty is leased, not owned. It's a contract with invisible clauses, valid only while the benefits outweigh the burdens. And when they don't, the silence begins. He mistook her staying for devotion. But survival doesn't need vows, just incentives. The truth? She wasn't loyal to him. She was loyal to what he offered, and that offer had an expiration date. She said, "I love you." But what she meant was, "You're currently useful." When his income fell, when his body changed, when the thrill faded, so did her warmth, not gradually, instinctively. Loyalty for many women is not a virtue, it's an equation. Provision plus protection plus desire, temporary allegiance. He didn't see it as math. He saw it as meaning. That was his mistake. She left without warning, but there were signs. Withdrawn touch, passive coldness, selective affection. What he called mood swings was her calculating next moves, because when instinct prepares to leave, it doesn't argue. It simply detaches. He thought love anchored her, but biology always has a backup plan. If another man offered more safety, more power, more tension, her subconscious was already migrating. She wasn't evil, she was evolving. He begged her to remember what they had. She smiled, but her eyes were empty. Because she wasn't in love anymore, she was in assessment, and he had already failed the evaluation, not emotionally, but economically, psychologically, sexually. So understand this: if her loyalty is based on function, it will vanish with dysfunction. It's not betrayal, it's biology. Romantic promises are theater. Instinct only keeps what maintains its survival. He sat in the ruins of what used to be a love story, but it wasn't weakness that cost him the woman. It was obsolescence. She didn't see a broken man. She saw a completed purpose, and instinct doesn't stay where need has vanished. He kept asking, "What did I do wrong?" But that question hides the real wound. What do I no longer solve? Even his strength, once admired, had become routine. And routine is invisible to instinct. In the beginning, he was a storm, unpredictable, provocative, possibility wrapped in chaos. But over time, he became safe, and safe men become shadows. She didn't need better. She needed different. Nature doesn't honor commitment. It honors advantage. And when her unconscious scanned the environment and sensed stagnation, the urge to pivot emerged. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she stopped needing him. He was her solution until he became her structure, and women rarely fall in love with what they can fully predict. She missed the hunger, the chase, the uncertainty, because mystery arouses instinct. Comfort silences it. She once admired his discipline. Now she calls it control. She once praised his focus. Now it feels like absence. Nothing changed, except what her body now prioritizes. He tried to reignite the fire. Trips, talks, tears. But instinct doesn't respond to effort. It responds to scarcity. And she already felt full, not with love, but with closure. He wasn't hated, he was finished. So hear this: you weren't left because you failed. You were left because you succeeded. And success stopped being exciting. In the world of instinct, necessity is love's only compass. And once you're no longer necessary, you're no longer chosen. He gave her everything: presence, patience, provision. But none of it moved her, not until he walked away. And suddenly, she was in love. Or at least, that's what she called the ache of losing control. He thought more affection would bring her closer. But neediness doesn't seduce, it suffocates. He didn't understand that love doesn't bloom in abundance. It grows in absence, in mystery, in distance. Instinct only longs for what it fears losing. She said he was too available, but what she meant was predictable. He showed up too fully, too fast, too often. There was no space to fantasize, to chase, to wonder. And without wonder, desire dies. When he withdrew, the dynamic reversed. Suddenly, he wasn't the one waiting. She was. And in that waiting, she felt scarcity. Scarcity triggers selection, and desire follows. He stopped texting. She started dreaming. He stopped explaining. She started reflecting. He became a symbol of lack. And that made him magnetic, because instinct doesn't crave closeness, it craves conquest. She didn't love the man, she loved the distance, loved what it did to her mind, the fantasies, the doubt, the internal chase. She thought it was passion, but it was projection awakened by withdrawal. He wasn't being strategic, he was just tired. Tired of begging for affection, tired of proving worth that should have been seen. And ironically, that exhaustion restored his value, because detachment often speaks louder than devotion. So if she only felt love once you left, it wasn't love she felt. It was panic, not for who you are, but for what your absence symbolized. Scarcity, and instinct always responds to that. He sat with the silence, calling it heartbreak. But what shattered wasn't love. It was pride, the illusion that he was the exception, that out of all men, he'd be the one she'd never leave. Not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. He thought she saw his soul, that she stayed because of who he was, but she stayed because of what he offered. Attention, direction, stability, and once those stopped feeling rare, they stopped feeling sacred. What he called devotion she experienced as repetition. What he believed was deep, she felt as familiar, and familiarity to the instinct is not comfort, it's boredom. Her biology didn't promise forever, it promised to stay until something better arrived. He kept asking, why wasn't I enough? But he was, for a while, until her unconscious mind sensed new potential, a shift in resource, a spike in opportunity. And suddenly, the man she once worshipped became background noise. Masculine value isn't preserved through loyalty. It's preserved through risk, through danger, through mystery, through psychological edge. When he became too available, he became too easy. And instinct never respects ease. He was irreplaceable in his own mind, but in hers he was a phase, a chapter, a necessary step toward her next strategic decision. She didn't see betrayal, she saw evolution. He lost the illusion that his essence guaranteed permanence, that emotional investment equals existential insurance. But romance was never about equality, it was about instinctual preference. And that shifts like the wind, especially when scarcity disappears. So understand this, she didn't fall out of love. She simply recalibrated her options. You weren't betrayed by her, you were betrayed by the myth of your own permanence. That's what burned. He listened to her, took notes, adjusted, softened his tone, showed more emotion, became agreeable, and with every change, she drifted further away. Not because he failed her, but because he obeyed her words. And her words didn't match her instincts. She said she wanted vulnerability, so he bled for her. But what she truly craved was containment, not collapse. She admired sensitivity until it made her the strong one. Then suddenly it was too much. He killed the fire to keep her warm, and in doing so, made himself invisible. She didn't lie to him. She just didn't know what would kill the spark. Until she watched it die in his compliance and mistook it for a natural drift. He thought alignment would inspire connection, but alignment without polarity is a friendship. She asked for emotional safety, but once he gave it, she missed the tension, the edge, the storm. She loved the chaos more than she knew. She gave him the blueprint for becoming desirable, but once he followed it, the mystery vanished. Desire isn't logical, it's reactive. And when the man stops leading, she starts testing, not out of malice, but instinct. He thought, if I become what she asks for, she'll never leave. But she didn't want control, she wanted containment. And when he handed her the reins, she didn't feel loved, she felt abandoned. There's a tragic irony here. He didn't betray her, he betrayed himself. And for that, she punished him with indifference. Because the moment he stopped resisting her blueprint, he stopped being her fantasy. So hear this, she didn't fall out of love. She fell out of polarity. Because the man who adapts to her words instead of reading her silence becomes exactly what she asked for, and everything she cannot want. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He saw her cry and thought it meant love, that her sorrow was proof of something sacred. But not all tears are a return. Some are just exit wounds, not from heartbreak, but from strategy collapsing. She wept, but not for him. He believed tears always meant truth. But emotion isn't always confession. Sometimes it's camouflage. Instincts don't apologize, they reposition. And crying can be just another way of resetting power, of controlling the farewell. She wept not because she lost a man, but because her next move wasn't ready. The tears were real, but they weren't for him. They were for the uncertainty now replacing his stability, grief for the comfort she outgrew. He saw softness and felt hope. But some tears are not bridges, they're curtains. Closing one chapter with a theatrical bow. She didn't cry to return, she cried to leave gently. Emotion is a tool, and women wield it well. Not always consciously, but effectively. A tear can delay confrontation. It can silence a man's anger, revive his empathy, just long enough to leave without feeling like the villain. He held her as she cried, still not realizing he was holding the death of a connection she no longer wanted. She didn't mourn the man. She mourned the narrative, the fantasy she thought this could be. And fantasies die slower than facts. He replayed that moment 1,000 times, thought it meant something unfinished, but those tears weren't love's resurrection. They were its funeral rites, a ceremonial closing, not a call to rebuild. So don't mistake her breakdown for your breakthrough. Tears don't always mean transformation. Sometimes they're just instinct releasing pressure. She didn't cry because she loved you. She cried because the plan no longer worked. He touched her with reverence, as if her skin held sacred meaning. But reverence without recognition is misread. He mistook intimacy for initiation, and in doing so, handed his soul to a symbol that was never spiritual. She opened her body, but not her heart. He thought the physical access meant emotional access, but instinct doesn't share soul. It shares strategy. And sometimes that strategy is just survival in disguise. He believed sex meant connection, that if she let him in, she wanted to stay. But what if her yes wasn't desire, just compliance, or comfort, or habit? Some women use touch the way others use words, to manage discomfort, to keep control, to delay truth. He thought the warmth was affection, but sometimes warmth is camouflage, and silence, consent's decoy. She wasn't seducing him. She was soothing herself, filling a night with noise to silence her own emptiness. He thought he was chosen, but he was just next. Next in a long line of emotional placeholders. He looked for meaning in her moans. But instinct doesn't speak in poetry. It negotiates in need. He gave her his fire, and she gave him her body. But neither gave their truth. The bed became a battlefield, not of pleasure, but of power, where he offered devotion, and she measured usefulness. No temple, no sacred union, just a silent trade. So understand this, her body wasn't a promise. It was a currency. And you weren't invited to her soul. You were rented space in her strategy. He wanted to believe she manipulated him, that she planned the exit, calculated the switch, faked the tears. But the truth cuts deeper. She didn't betray him. His fantasy did, and fantasies have no conscience. Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakes." He looked outside, at her smile, her scent, her warmth. He called it fate, but it was just projection wrapped in perfume. His need dressed up as destiny. She didn't lie. Her biology spoke the truth in a language he refused to learn. He thought he was choosing love, but it was instinct choosing him, briefly, and when it didn't need him anymore, it vanished. He called it love, but nature doesn't love, it selects. Schopenhauer warned us, behind romance is arithmetic. A formula of genes, risk, and advantage. Not vows, not soulmates, outcomes. She didn't fulfill her promise because she never made one. He filled in the blanks with hope, with childhood longing, with loneliness, and that hope became a noose, not around her neck, but his. He hung his identity on a woman born to adapt. Now comes the descent. Not into depression, into clarity, into the myth of romantic salvation he inherited from songs, stories, and silence. He must unlearn everything soft he was taught and return to what's real, not what's rehearsed. She didn't destroy him. She revealed the mask he was wearing, the illusion of being enough just for existing. But nature doesn't reward essence. It rewards impact. Brutal, measurable, instinctual impact. So what now? Burn the image, mourn the fiction, reclaim the man. Because instinct owes you nothing. But clarity is your birthright. You saw her as a muse. But what if she was just a mirror, reflecting everything you abandoned in yourself? It was never about her love. It was about your longing. The part of you that still believed someone else could complete what only your soul can reclaim. Now you know. Instinct doesn't make promises. It makes decisions. Not based on essence, but on advantage. Not on connection, but on calculation. So ask yourself, what are you offering that can't be replaced? What part of you still believes loyalty is owed to the one who awakened your wounds? The myth is dead, the man is not. It's time to stop kneeling at the altar of her approval and build your own temple, one forged from silence, scars, and sovereignty. Because in the end, it was never about being loved, it was about becoming undeniable. So if you're ready to rise, not as her choice, but as your own force, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay on this journey of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. If this opened your eyes, the next will cut deeper. Because Schopenhauer didn't just warn you about women, he warned you about yourself, and men keep ignoring it. That's why they keep suffering.